In the United States alone, there are over 550,000 workers involved in some form of welding, cutting, or brazing work. These are hazardous activities, which can pose a combination of both safety and health risks for employees. Welding is an important part of the manufacturing process of many consumer and industrial goods, such as the manufacturing of airplanes, automobiles, and household appliances. Welding also plays a vital role in the construction industry and is often used in the construction of buildings, bridges, and other structures. Welding, cutting, and brazing can be very dangerous, and proper work practices must be followed to avoid injuries, fires, and even explosions. This type of work is often referred to as hot work throughout industrial settings, construction sites, and the maritime industry. There are instances in which a special hot work permit is required to perform welding and related activities. The safety and well-being of workers involved in welding, cutting, or brazing is the impetus behind OSHA's regulations covering these activities. OSHA has noted a rise in injuries related to welding practices. This video training program will highlight some of the most common practices and safety hazards related to welding. The contents of this program include types of welding, types of cutting, hazards of welding, fire prevention and protection, special precautions, protection of personnel, PPE, ventilation, work in confined spaces. This training program will take a closer look at some major safety and health-related issues surrounding welding, cutting, and brazing. In this training program, welding will mean any electric or gas welding, cutting, and brazing activity, and welder will mean any operator of electric or gas welding and cutting equipment. Plastic materials can also be welded, but this program is concentrating on the welding of metals only. Welding is frequently referred to as hot work and is defined as the process of joining two different objects by melting their surfaces together. This is done by heating the materials until a molten puddle is formed. Usually, more metal is added to the mix by means of a welding rod or filler rod. Welds are most commonly done on like metals. If done properly, the weld will be as strong or stronger than the metal being joined. Brazing is the process of joining two different metal objects with the use of a third dissimilar filler metal. The two objects are bonded together by completely wetting the surfaces with molten filler metal and held together until the bond solidifies. The bond is only as strong as the filler material, but can still be very strong. Cutting means just what the term implies: cutting metal. Instead of bonding two separate metal objects together, the welder removes or severs a piece of metal into different pieces. There are even cutting techniques that use a laser to cut the metal. There are many different methods of welding, which use a variety of energy sources to perform the task. Two of the more common types are gas welding and shielded metal arc welding. Fuel gas welding, a form of gas welding, is one of the oldest and still more popular methods of welding. It involves the use of a fuel combined with oxygen to produce a very hot flame. The most common fuel used is acetylene. Other gases used are propylene, MAP gas, natural gas, hydrogen, liquefied petroleum, and propane. The gases are stored in gas cylinders, regulated and combined in a torch which is lit by means of a spark tool. Shielded metal arc welding joins two metals together by producing an electric arc between the base metals to be joined and a flux-coated consumable electrode rod. A flux is a chemical cleaning agent, flowing agent, or purifying agent. As the weld is laid, the flux coating disintegrates, giving off vapors which serve as a shielding gas. The flux also provides a layer of slag, protecting the weld area from atmospheric contamination. Two of the most common cutting processes are oxygen and arc. Oxygen cutting is the process of heating the metal to its kindling temperature by gas flame, and then cut with a high-pressure stream of oxygen that is forced on the area to be cut. Arc cutting is the process of melting or cutting metal using the intense heat generated from an electric arc. As stated earlier, even lasers can be used to perform cutting tasks. Welding is performed in many different environments, including confined spaces, open air, underwater, underground, and even in space. Welding can be dangerous and include such hazards as fires, confined spaces, eye damage, inhalation of poison gases and fumes, shock, cuts, and exposure to intense ultraviolet radiation. Many of these hazards can be greatly reduced with administrative and engineering controls, proper work practices, and personal protective equipment. One of the most important aspects of being a welder is recognizing the dangers of producing fires and how to prevent them. Always survey the area before you are about to weld. Many facilities have permit requirements. If you need to have a welding permit, sometimes referred to as a hot work permit, make sure you obtain the permit before beginning welding work. Welding activities naturally produce sparks, slag, molten metal, and hot work surfaces. Sparks are the main cause of fire and explosions. They can travel great lengths, carried by wind, and are even more hazardous when they fall from upper levels. If the object being welded can't be moved, then all movable fire hazards in the vicinity should be taken to a safe place. Fire hazards include such combustible materials as wood, clothing, paper, chemicals, liquids, and fuels. Guards must be utilized if the object being welded or all fire hazards can't be moved. Guards and shields confine the heat, sparks, and slag, protecting the immovable fire hazards and personnel in the area. If the object being welded can't be moved, and all fire hazards can't be moved, and guards are not feasible, then welding should not be performed. When the nature of the work to be performed requires guards, then certain additional precautions may be necessary. Whenever there are floor openings or cracks which cannot be closed, precautions must be taken to protect readily combustible materials from sparks dropping through the floor. The same precautions must be taken for holes and cracks in walls, open doorways, and open or broken windows. Appropriate fire extinguishing equipment must be maintained and ready for instant use. A fire watch must be maintained for at least 30 minutes after the welding job is complete, where other than a minor fire is possible. The fire watcher must be trained and qualified and know the location of fire alarms or the procedures to follow in case of a fire. OSHA requires a fire watch person to be someone that is knowledgeable about the job site. Being a fire watch individual is an important and critical job. The person responsible for welding operations must inspect the area and determine necessary precautions to be followed, preferably using a written permit. Floors should be kept swept clean of combustible materials for a radius of at least 35 feet away from the work area. Combustible floors must be kept wet, covered with damp sand, or protected by fire-resistant shields. When floors have been wet down, personnel operating arc welding equipment must be protected from electrical shock. Welding is prohibited in the following situations: in areas not authorized by management, when sprinkler protection is impaired, in the presence of explosive atmospheres, in areas near the storage of large quantities of exposed, readily ignitable materials, such as bulk sulfur, baled paper, or cotton. Other safety measures include moving combustible materials at least 35 feet from the work site when and where practical. Otherwise, they must be properly protected or shielded. Shut down ducts and conveyors which may carry sparks. When welding in close proximity, protect combustible walls with fire-resistant shields or guards. When welding on non-combustible walls, protect items on the opposite side of the wall from igniting, preferably by relocating those materials. If the materials can't be moved, then a fire watch is required. If welding on a platform, scaffold, or runway, welders and helpers must use fall protection equipment. Always keep welding cables and other equipment clear of passageways, ladders, and stairways. Your company has obligations to their employees to keep them safe. Always follow company rules and regulations. When moving gas cylinders, make sure they have the protective caps on them and are secured to a cart. Always keep welding cylinders upright and secured to a cart or other method to secure them. Welding should not be performed on used drums, barrels, tanks, or other containers until they have been thoroughly cleaned and it is absolutely certain there are no flammable substances still present. Any pipelines or connections to the container must be disconnected or blanked also. All hollow spaces, cavities, or containers must be vented to permit the escape of air or gases before welding. Purging with an inert gas such as nitrogen is recommended. Employees must always be protected from various hazards when welding or working in the area of welding work. The proper personal protective equipment can protect welders and others from burns, electric shock, eye damage, sparks, and other hazards, and is required in every welding situation. Proper eye and face protection must be provided based on the type of welding being performed. Not only should the welder be protected, but also any other employee working nearby. Such protection may include welding helmets, safety glasses, goggles, face shields, curtains, or combinations thereof. All face protection must meet certain safety requirements and standards as directed by OSHA. Lenses should bear a permanent marking indicating the manufacturer and the shade number. Some standard eye and face safety guidelines. Clean and inspect welding helmets and eyewear regularly and keep them in good condition. Wear safety goggles with side and top protection under welding helmets. Make sure goggles or helmets have the correct shade of filter for the task. Keep face and eye protection on whenever hazards are present. When possible, isolate welding areas from others with partitions or curtains designed to absorb harmful welding rays. Follow all manufacturer guidelines and procedures to ensure proper eye protection. Appropriate protective clothing must be worn when welding. The size, nature, and location of the work will determine the type of clothing protection needed. General protective clothing guidelines include: wear a fire-resistant cap under the welding helmet. The use of earplugs or muffs might be appropriate to keep hot sparks or other material from entering your ears, and to protect from loud noise. Wear leather high-topped boots to protect your feet and ankles. The use of fire-resistant boot protectors may be required. Never wear cuffed pants, which can collect flying sparks or hot metal. Keep your pants pulled over the tops of your boots, and always wear fire-resistant insulated welding gloves, which are free of holes or other damage. Replace worn gloves or gloves that show damage. Clothing made of wool or heavy cotton is best to wear. Wear long-sleeve shirts with buttoned cuffs and collars, and long, heavy-duty pants. Keep your shirts buttoned. Keep all protective clothing dry, clean, and without any holes. This helps prevent clothing from catching fire. Remove all objects from your pockets before welding. Use leather aprons, vests, sleeves, and leggings as needed. Ventilation is necessary to keep hazardous fumes, gases, and dust away from the welder and other workers in the area, and more specifically, their breathing area. Proper ventilation can be obtained through natural means or mechanical. Natural ventilation utilizes the natural flow of air through open doors and windows. Mechanical ventilation manipulates the airflow with devices like a fan, exhaust hood, or booth to keep contaminants below the permissible exposure limit, or PEL. If welding is being performed and screens are used on all four sides, they must be arranged in such a way as to not restrict ventilation. It is best to mount the screens about 2 feet above the ground, unless this would create a glare hazard for nearby workers. Toxic fumes, gases, and dust must be kept below the maximum PELs through local exhaust or general ventilation systems. Natural ventilation is sufficient when the following criteria are met. The welding area contains at least 10,000 cubic feet per welder. The ceiling height is at least 16 feet high. There are no barriers to blocking cross ventilation, and the welding space is not a confined space. If any of these requirements are not met, then mechanical ventilation is required and must exhaust at least 2,000 cubic feet of air per minute per welder, unless an airline respirator is used or local exhaust hoods or booths are used. If local exhaust hoods or booths are used, they must provide airflow of at least 100 linear feet per minute. Specific materials which require mechanical ventilation measures include fluorine compounds, zinc, lead, beryllium, cadmium, mercury cleaning compounds, stainless steel, aluminum. When welding is performed in confined spaces, specific OSHA requirements regarding the confined space must also be considered and followed before work can be performed. Some of the things which must be considered include ventilation. Confined spaces must be adequately ventilated to prevent the accumulation of toxic materials or possible oxygen deficiency. This applies to the welder as well as helpers and other personnel in the immediate vicinity. If adequate ventilation is not possible, airline respirators must be used. In areas designated immediately dangerous to life, a self-contained breathing apparatus must be used. Oxygen should never be used for ventilation. Gas cylinders and welding machines must be left outside of the confined space. When a welder must enter a confined space through a manhole or other small opening, a lifeline must be provided for quickly removing the welder in case of emergency. The welder is the entrant and must wear a full body harness with a lifeline attached to the D-ring of the harness. When arc welding is to be suspended for any substantial period of time, such as during lunch or overnight, all electrodes must be removed from the holders and the holders located to prevent accidental contact. Additionally, the welding machine must be disconnected from the power source. In order to eliminate the possibility of gas escaping through leaks or improperly closed valves, torch valves must be closed and the gas supply shut off at the cylinder. Always shut off your equipment during lunch breaks and after your shift. Never leave it unattended in a ready-to-use condition. When practical, the torch and hose should also be removed from the confined space. After the work is complete, the welder should mark any hot metal or provide some means of warning other workers. If welding in a confined space, make sure you are adequately trained. OSHA has specific training requirements regarding confined spaces. Some additional safety guidelines to follow when welding. Never smoke around welding cylinders. Always inspect the area and your equipment prior to welding. If the equipment needs to be repaired, it should be only performed by qualified individuals. Only weld in areas approved by management. Move combustible items at least 35 feet away from the work site to provide protection from the welding work. Wear the appropriate protective clothing and PPE. Inspect the PPE before using. Do not use worn or defective PPE. Never breathe in the fumes or gases emitted from welding. Position yourself to keep your head out of the danger zone. Always provide correct ventilation methods. If you must use a respirator, make sure you have been trained on its use, are medically capable, and passed a fit test. If you are welding in a confined space, additional training is necessary to ensure your safety. Safety is always a part of your job. Remember, welding is an important and rewarding job, and it's up to you to do it safely.